it's like I have light shining down on me like I'm some sort of angel. A lot of things to say about sobriety and addiction and why these things are important to everyone, not just the addict or the family of the addict. There's a lot of really common misconceptions about what addiction really is. A lot of people seem to think it's a willpower issue, seem to think it's something you can just control if you just don't do it. Oh, well, maybe if he was a little stronger, he'd be able to get past it. You have to understand neurologically what goes on in the addict's mind, which is, it's difficult. They don't really understand a lot about the human brain and how it really functions. Believe it or not, you know, there's a lot that's not understood about how the brain works. It's like a mystery. We're like in the fucking dark ages with neuroscience. So what we have going on is you have the reward center of the brain, and this is what's responsible for releasing dopamine into the body and giving you pleasure when you do something good. This part of the brain is old. It's instinctual. This is the same part of the brain that alligators have active. You know, this is something, it's an evolutionary throwback, and it's there for a reason, and it's needed. Mammals and higher animals have developed the frontal cortex, which is the wrinkly part of the brain. That's where logic and reason happen. Logic and reason are a separate part of the brain from the reward center. Now, what happens in the reward center is what is normally done in that area of the brain. What normally causes the release of dopamine is a process. It's a long-term thing. Your rewards aren't instant. That's not how things usually work in real life. So what drugs do and alcohol is they completely bypass that, and they basically give instant gratification and instant release of dopamine into the body. That section of the brain begins to identify, they begin to identify the source, the sole source of joy and pleasure to come from the drugs or alcohol or whatever addictive behavior it is. So you have this area of the brain that's not connected to your logic and reason that starts searching out for the substances that give it pleasure. Like I said, the frontal cortex is for logic and reason. This is where you think, I shouldn't steal all the money out of my wife's wallet. Or, I shouldn't empty out my mom's bank account. That's the area of the brain that says that's a bad idea. The reward center of the brain is saying, do whatever you can to get what we want, to feel good. So you have two battling parts of the brain, and it's not a matter of willpower, it's a matter of which section of your brain is going to win. Now, in a normal person, what they're going to have is they're going to say, I'm not going to steal money from my wife or my mom. I'm just not going to do drugs. That's what a normal person would do. What happens in the addict's brain is the addict's brain has basically become hardwired to do whatever it takes. Now, a certain level of logic and reason work, but the worse the addiction becomes, the less logic and reason function. Now, you want to couple this on top of the fact that drugs and alcohol affect the frontal cortex and impair your logic and reason. Now, while you're under the influence of alcohol, everybody knows that when you get drunk, you do stupid shit. Everybody knows that. But what that means is your frontal cortex does not function properly during those times. The logic and reason do not have power over the instinctual drive for pleasure. That's why people a lot of times will start to drink and they don't know when to stop. Long-term drug and alcohol use cause continued impairment of the frontal cortex. This is why a drug addict may not be high at the time, but they're still acting like a fucking maniac, and they're still doing stupid shit. The frontal cortex isn't functioning properly. It's been impaired by substances and drugs. It takes a long time to heal that. It's not an overnight thing. A lot of times it takes years of psychotherapy to overcome that stuff. There's a lot of conscious effort that has to go into it. What people seem to think is that it's willpower. Well, willpower would be if your frontal cortex is fully functioning and in control. But like I said, that reward center of your brain is seeking out the pleasure. And let's be honest, like, people often, even people that are not addicts, let themselves be ruled by seeking pleasure and comfort over logic and reason constantly. You eat the shitty food. You eat the ice cream. You eat the fucking bag of potato chips. You hit the snooze button too many times because the bed's warm. Like, this is your instinctual brain seeking pleasure and comfort. That's the same exact fucking thing as an addict robbing somebody to get money. It's the same fucking thing, except the addict robbing somebody to get money is way worse. Way worse. So you have to understand that the instinctual part of the brain, the reward center of your brain, in the addict's brain, cannot stop simply by saying, I need to stop. It's a sickness, and that just shows that it's a sickness. There's an improperly functioning part of the brain. And yeah, there are outside things that are making it worse, but any sickness, outside things can make it worse. You don't yell at a diabetic for being diabetic. You understand that they have to take insulin. You understand that they need to stay away from sugary foods. But for some reason, you yell at an addict. What you have to understand and what you have to do is realize that this is an illness and it is not fixed overnight. And that, yeah, while an addict or an alcoholic is responsible for their actions, at the same time, they're not themselves when they do it because their entire brain is just rerouted and fucked. You have an area of your brain that is seeking out pleasure and comfort at all costs, and then you have an area of your brain that's supposed to regulate those impulses that doesn't function. Now the thing is, we carry a really heavy social stigma about addiction in America, in the world, but especially around, in America. We seem to think that, well, for one thing, we pretty much advocate drinking, which I don't care. Like, most people can drink or can smoke a joint or can, do all these other things and be okay, and they're fine. That's just, they're okay with it. I'm one of those people who can't do any of those things or shit hits the fan real fast. And that's the thing, is because we all have different brain chemistry. Everybody's brain is different. We all have different genetic makeup. So you can't assume what's going to work for one person is going to work for another. But what you have is you have a society that stigmatizes the addict and treats them like a criminal and doesn't treat them like a person who needs medical help. And that's really what's going on, is if you're an addict, you need medical help. You need psychological help, which is medical help. Don't ever think that because you need therapy, you're fucking crazy. People stigmatize the addict in America as being a criminal when, yes, addicts commit criminal acts all the time. They break the law constantly. But again, this is a sickness, and it basically strips the person of their all rational decision making, and that's why they act like fucking maniacs. That's also why you hear people talk about, people that do have drug and alcohol problems. You hear them talk about, I don't know why I do this. What? And it's also the same thing when, even if you don't have a drinking problem, if you drink too much one night and you're like, oh man, why the fuck did I do that? So stupid. It's because your logic and reason are impaired and your body is going after the pleasure. They talk about, oh, love is crazy. People do crazy things for love. And it's like, yeah, they do. Because that emotion is also rooted in the reward center of the brain. So if love is rooted in the reward center of the brain, you end up doing stupid shit for love. Because because it overrides your logic and reason. The pleasure that you get from the love overrides all of the negative that happens and all of the bad things that can happen. You know, I just want to say that, you know, there's a lot of people that do suffer from addictions and substance abuse problems, gambling addictions, you know, shopping addictions, kleptomaniacs. There's a million things people can find some level of addiction to, and sometimes people don't even realize it. And I think that's really the saddest part, is when you suffer from this and you don't know it. Be aware. You know, be aware of what your behavior is like, and you know, what it really says about you, what it means. It's good to take time to evaluate these kind of things, because I was in denial that I was an alcoholic for a really long time. You know, I thought I get carried away, you know, I have problems with moderating, and it's like, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. I could moderate until I couldn't. And that's the thing. Eventually I wasn't going to moderate. So I'm going to recap real quick, because I know a lot of people that are watching this probably did not start watching it when I started it. So I'm going to go ahead and just run back through the first thing I talked about, which is what's going on in the brain of the addict, and why this is an illness and not a matter of willpower. And people, exactly, and people need to understand that this isn't a matter of willpower. So what has to happen in the brain of the addict? What's going on in the brain of the addict is you have the reward center of the brain, which is a primal instinctual area that seeks out pleasure and comfort. Normally, pleasure and comfort come at a slow pace after earning it by doing some sort of actions to get it. What drugs and alcohol do is they give you immediate satisfaction, immediate joy, immediate release of dopamine into the body. And then you have the frontal cortex, which is a separate section of the brain that does not communicate with the reward center. They're separate parts of the brain. They don't interact. I mean, I'm sure they interact at some level, but they don't interact on a major level. They can't affect the decisions of each other. So you have the reward center now seeking out substances, drugs, and alcohol to make it feel good, because it wants the instant gratification of the drug as opposed to the long-term gratification of harder work. And then you have the frontal cortex, which is the area of the brain that's involved with logic, decision-making, reason. This area is affected by the drugs and alcohol, like immediately affected, and impairs your logic and reason. Everybody knows you do stupid shit when you're drunk. Your reasoning skills are all fucked up. You hear about, you know, beer goggles. That's a great example of how your reasoning is impaired when you're drinking. So you have the logic and reason in the frontal cortex not functioning properly, not communicating with the reward center that's seeking out pleasure. So that begins to override the frontal cortex. So in the addict's brain, the reward center is what's in control. The logic and reason take a fucking dive out the window. And then you have just this, basically this primal instinctual drive to get drugs. You made some stupid decisions, but you don't need to be demonized by society because you made some dumb decisions. Because once you hit that level of addiction, it's real fucking hard to get out of it, because at this point you have neural pathways that have been formed that your brain is seeking out drugs and alcohol or whatever it is your substance or activity of choice is. Your brain is seeking that, and you can't control it because your logic and reason can't override that area of your brain. To actually get real treatment, you need long-term sobriety. You got to stay sober for a long time. You need community with like-minded people. You need therapy. Well, not everybody. I mean, but this is my experience. You need therapy. These are the ways that you need to work on productivity and your positivity and being motivated to do things for other people. Okay, doing things to be of service to other people. These are really important things to stay sober and stay clean, because what this starts doing is it starts rewiring the pathways in the reward center to get pleasure from other things other than the drugs. This is why when people stop being addicts, they feel like they can't enjoy anything, because they really don't know how to enjoy anything. Because for so long, the brain has only identified their drug of choice as the sole and only way to find any real pleasure. That's really all I had to say about addiction, sobriety, the neurology of addiction. If you do have any questions or any thoughts about sobriety, recovery, mental health, anything like that that might be related to this feed, please message me. I haven't been able to read any of the comments. If you have questions or comments or thoughts about any of this, message me. Shoot me a direct message. Go ahead, do it right now. You can do it. And I will be happy to answer any and all questions about sobriety, recovery, addiction, any of that shit. So yeah, go right ahead and do that. I want to thank all you guys for tuning in and watching me and listening to this. It's really important to me, and I feel that a lot of people deal with addiction issues. Even if they're not the addicted one, they might have a family member that's addicted, but they don't feel like they can talk about it. And I want you to know that it's okay to talk about it. You can talk about this. The stigma has to be removed about what addiction and mental health are and what they mean to us as a society and as people. That stigma has to go away. And that's why I will continue to talk about this, and I encourage you to talk about it too. If you don't feel comfortable, I understand, and that's fine. You have to find your own level of comfort. You find that level. You find that level of comfort with talking about this stuff. I'll continue to talk about it, and I'll advocate as much as I can for this cause, because it affects all of us, and it's very near and dear to my heart. So I love you guys. Thank you for watching this. I really appreciate your attention, and I can't thank you guys enough.